Last week's portion ended off how Zimri ben Soloi, who was the leader of the tribe of Shimon, was having relations with one of the Midianite princesses. And a plague broke out where 24,000 Jews died. And Pinchas went over to Moshe Rabbeinu and he said, "What should I do? Isn't it true that if a Jewish man is cohabitating with a non-Jewish woman, then kanoyin poigim boy, the one who is zealot should go and take revenge?" And Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Kleiner liigrite ihu levi prevanke," which means the reader of the letter should perform what the letter says. And so Pinchas took a spear and he went into the tent of Zimri and he put the spear and he pierced it into Zimri and into this Midianite woman. And then he lifted both of them up in his hands and he ran through the camp showing everybody what he did. At that time the plague ceased and nobody else had to die. This week's Torah portion, the portion of Pinchas, opens up with God telling Pinchas, "Being that you have calmed my wrath, therefore I will give you Shalom, I will give you an everlasting covenant." And what does it mean, Shalom, an everlasting covenant? One of the interpretations is that I will make you a Kohen. That God told Pinchas now at this time he will become a Kohen. And all the commentaries ask, what does that mean? How does God make Pinchas a Kohen? Isn't a Kohen something that you have to be born into? So why is it now, after this act that Pinchas performed, is he given the blessing or the covenant of becoming a Kohen? Furthermore, we find something in this week's Parsha that we don't see in the entire book of Numbers or in the 5 books of Moses. And that is that the letter Vav of the word Shalom is split in half. It's called a Vav Katia. So the letter Vav has a crack in it, a Yud on the top and a Vav on the bottom. And this is found in every Sefer Torah. So the question is, why is the letter Vav of the word Shalom, of the word peace, cracked into 2? So let us understand what it means to become a Kohen. In truth, Pinchas' father was a Kohen. Pinchas ben Elazar, he was the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, who was the first Kohen. So why was Pinchas not a Kohen? So the practical reason is that when God told Aaron that you are going to be a Kohen, he said you and your 4 children are going to be Kohanim. And now all the children that are going to be born to your 4 children, in the future they too will become Kohanim. Pinchas was already born, and therefore he was not part of the original group of Kohanim. And only the future children of Elazar would become Kohanim. So he was, so to speak, gypped out of his Kohanite. However, in truth, God wanted Pinchas to earn the Kohanite. What does it mean to earn the Kohanite? So the Rambam tells us that not only the tribe of Levi alone can become Kohanim, but rather any person that dedicates his life to God, that person is a Kohen. Not only is he a Kohen, but he could actually reach the level of Holy of Holies, implying he could even be a Kohen Gadol, a high priest. So in other words, if a person acts like a Kohen, then he is a Kohen. What does it mean to act like a Kohen? To dedicate your life to God. we are told that there are 5 levels to the soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. The 5th level of the soul, which is called Yechida, is the level of unity when man and God are truly one. This concept of the 5th level of the soul is accessed at a time of Mesiras Nefesh, at a time of self-sacrifice, when a person goes beyond their comfort zone. When a person does something that is supra-rational, then he is able to access this 5th level of the soul. This is also known as the Mashiach of every human being, or the Mashiach of every individual. For every Jew has a spark of Mashiach in them. So what happened was that Pinchas, because he put his life in danger, going into the tent of the leader of the tribe of Shimon, and he could have died, he could have been killed, yet he knew that he was doing something for God. So because of this, he accessed his Kohanite level of the soul. And now God tells him, because you acted like a Kohen, now you will truly become a Kohen. So this concept of becoming a Kohen and accessing this level of Kohen, this is blessed with Brisi Shalom. This is blessed with the covenant of peace. What does peace mean? Peace, in truth, we find the expression of peace in marriage. We say Shalom Bayis. You know, you should have peace in the house. By brother and sister, you don't say peace. Even by father and son and mother and daughter, we don't say peace. It's respect your parents, love your children. The terminology of peace is primarily when we talk about 2 opposites. A man and a woman from 2 different backgrounds who are now coming together into one home. So by nature, they're different. By nature, they shouldn't really live together because they're opposite. Yet, they have the blessing of peace. They are able to bring these 2 opposites and unite them. So something which is opposite and it comes together is called peace. God blessed Pinchas with the power of peace because he was able to unite a level of the soul that was beyond time and space and bring that into the world, into a place of time and space. And this is recorded in the Torah by the fact that the letter Vav is split into 2. For the top part of the Vav is a Yud, and the lower part of the Vav is a Vav. A Yud represents godliness. It's a very, very small letter. It's a dot. God is represented by the letter Yud. The letter Yud represents a flame, representing spirituality. Also, God is like the letter Yud because he's indivisible. Also, the first letter of God's ineffable name, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, starts with the letter Yud. So the Yud represents God. And on a larger scale, the Yud represents spirituality. The lower part of the Vav is the letter Vav. Vav is like a chute descending down into the world. Also, the gematria, the numerical computation of Vav is 6, alluding to the 6 days of creation. So what is the Vav? The Vav is a combination of a Yud, which is spirituality, and the lower part of the Vav, which is physicality. And now it has the blessing and the covenant of peace to unite heaven and earth together. And that is why we find that Pinchas was able to truly go through all the worlds very freely. He was able to be in this world, yet he was able to travel into the spiritual worlds. He was in a spiritual world, and yet he was able to travel down into the physical world. Where do we see that? The Gemara tells us, Pinchas Eliyahu, that Pinchas is really the same as Elijah the prophet. And we know that Elijah the prophet never died. He went up in a chariot of fire, and he comes down every Pesach to the Seder, and at every bris milah, every circumcision, Elijah the prophet is there. And there are many, many stories of how Elijah clothed himself into different people, and he came as an emissary of God down here to this world. So this quality of Brisi Shalom, the covenant of peace, to unite two worlds together, the Yud of spirituality and the Vav of physicality, this was given to Pinchas, who's Eliyahu, who was also Elijah the prophet. And similarly, we find that according to the Safronoi, that Pinchas actually lived 300 years in this world. He was in the world, yet he transcended time and space. And as we mentioned earlier, that the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says that Pinchas was actually Eliyahu, and therefore, in truth, he never died. And this was brought about because in his own lifetime, he was able to access the fifth level of the soul, the level of self-sacrifice, which is a level of the super consciousness, a level beyond time and space. So, what is the lesson for all of us? And ultimately, why is the Vav of Shalom still split, still cracked? On one hand, the word Shalom, peace, also comes from the word Shalim, or Shalem, which means whole. And yet this word that represents wholeness is actually cracked. I believe that the message is that we find ourselves now in the 3 weeks. The portion of Pinchas was always read during the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks of national mourning for the Jewish people. For on the 17th of Tammuz, a few days ago, the walls of Jerusalem were breached. And on the 9th of Av, 3 weeks later, the first and the second holy temples were destroyed. So these 3 weeks, we are fixing the Churban, the destruction of the Holy Temple. But the Rebbe has told us many times that being that we are now the last generation of exile and the first generation of Geula, that the focus of these 3 weeks should not be so much over the destruction of the temple or the fixing the temple, but rather the focus of these 3 weeks have to be optimistic. And that is the hachana, the preparation for the rebuilding of the third holy temple. And we do this primarily by studying the laws of Hilchos Beis HaBechira, the laws of the building of the Holy Temple, as the Rambam talks about in the 8th book of Code. And also to study in Yonei Geula Mashiach, to study the laws and the teachings pertaining to redemption and the coming of Mashiach. That this not only gives us the excitement to await the coming of Mashiach, and not only is this a segula, a good omen to bring about the coming of Mashiach, but the studying of these laws, dealing with the building of the temple and the laws of Mashiach, create an ambiance that we begin to live with Mashiach. And that is the ultimate preparation for the coming of Mashiach, that when Mashiach comes, he should see that we're actually living the way we should be when Mashiach comes. So the Torah tells us that we are to know that the Shalom, the Vav of Shalom is cracked. Why? Because until Mashiach actually comes, we have to realize that we don't truly experience the ultimate peace. It is true that we live in America and we, thank God, live in a free country, and Jews have the right of freedom of speech and the freedom of press, and we have the ability to live our lives as Jews openly, and we have the right to vote, and we can run for even the President of the United States. But at the same time, we have to realize that there's still an imperfection that will not be complete until Mashiach comes. It's interesting that a woman once wrote the Rebbe a letter, and she told the Rebbe that, her husband has this flaw and this imperfection, that she's trying to fix him, she's trying to make him perfect, but he's not listening, and what should she do? And the Rebbe basically, to paraphrase, tells her that you should know that from the sin of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the world is imperfect. and you will not see perfection until Mashiach comes. So if you're looking for perfection, you have to look somewhere else. But in this world, you ain't going to find perfection. So basically, see the good in your husband and love him and work it out together. But this is the concept of Shalom. That on one hand, we could have peace, and we could live together, and we could unify spirituality and physicality together. But perfection, the true Shalom, will only come about when Mashiach comes. And this is hinted in the gematria of the word Shalom. For the word Shalom has the gematria of 376, and says the Baal HaTurim that that is the same gematria as the two words Zehu Mashiach, this is the Mashiach, this is the Messiah. In other words, when Mashiach will actually come, and Mashiach will truly reveal himself, then we will witness a true Shalom, a true peace in our own life, in our home, in the world at large, and the true Shalom, the true peace between heaven and earth, between God and the Jewish people. So what is the message of the Parsha of Pinchas? We know that the word Torah means Hira'ah, Torah means lesson. The Torah is not a book of nice novels or stories or fairy tales. The Torah is a book of teaching. From every story in the Torah, we have to learn a lesson. And what is the lesson that we derive from the portion of Pinchas? And perhaps we could understand this with the following story. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, since he became Rebbe in 1950, never left Crown Heights. He never went on vacation. He would go once or twice or 3 times a week in the later years to the Ohel, to the cemetery where his father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 6th Rebbe, was buried. And he would pray there on behalf of Klal Yisrael, on behalf of the Jewish people. And then there were 3 times that he went up to the Catskills for a few hours. He left in the morning and he came back in the evening. And he went to speak and to inspire the girls' camp, Camp Amunah, and he would go to the boys' camp, Camp Gan Yisrael. It is told that on one of these occasions, when the Rebbe went to Camp Gan Yisrael, he looked at a boy who was running around on the campus, and he calls him over and he says, "What's your name?" And the boy says, "My name is Meir." He said, "Zog the ganze Namen, and tell me your whole name." He said, "Meir Shmuel." And the Rebbe turned to the director of the camp and said, "No, not often do we have the family of Mashiach with us." And the director of the camp did not know what the Rebbe was talking about. So the Rebbe turns to the boy and says, "Tell me your father's name." He said, "My father's name is Chaim Yankel." So the Rebbe said, "No, Oisya is Mashiach. Don't you see that these 4 names together spell out the word Mashiach? For Mashiach is Mem, Mem is Meir, Shin is Shmuel, Yud is Yaakov, and Ches is Chaim." So these 4 names are the Rosh Tevis, are the first letters of these 4 names, spell out the word Mashiach. The story doesn't end there, but about 30 years later, there was a fellow from Borough Park going to Crown Heights one Sunday morning to receive a dollar and a blessing from the Rebbe. And he turned to this fellow, Rabbi Meir Lieberman, and said, "Would you like to come with us together? We're going to the Rebbe." And he said, "You know what? I haven't seen the Rebbe in 30 years. I would love to go for $1. And they went together, and as they were online, and there were thousands of people that went every Sunday by the Rebbe with $1, and the Rebbe gave them $1 and a blessing. And as this fellow, Rabbi Meir Lieberman, walks by the Rebbe looks at him and says, "Nu, was machst du, Rabbi Meir? How are you, Rabbi Meir? And how is your father, Rabbi Chaim, doing?" Now this story is a mind-boggling story. The Rebbe hadn't seen this kid, who now is an adult, for 30 years. And in a split second, the Rebbe had total recall. He was able to see who he was, and he remembered his name. He remembered his father's name. and it's true that the Rebbe is a prophet, and all these wonderful things. But I believe that on a simple level, what we can derive from the story is that the Rebbe saw Mashiach in everything. When he looked at this child, right away he saw Mashiach. That every Jew has a spark of Mashiach in them. And our job is to see the Mashiach in every reality. They tell another story that when the Rebbe was in camp, and he was going through all the bunks to see how it was set up, he also went into the arts and crafts room. And that was a room where the children would come, and they would make a lot of noise and also a lot of mess. And there were sparklers and glue and sawdust all over the place, and paint, etc., etc. So the counselors that were in charge of the arts and crafts room, what they did was they painted in the center of the roof of the ceiling, they wrote, Zecher l'churban, a remembrance for the destruction of the Holy Temple. So the Rebbe would walk in, he would look around, he would see the Zecher l'churban, a remembrance of the destruction of the Holy Temple. He wouldn't, be upset by the mess. So the Rebbe walks in, he looks around, boom, and he sees right away the ceiling, it says Zecher l'churban, and the Rebbe said, Zecher l'churban, Zecher l'mikdash. In other words, not a remembrance to the destruction of the temple, but rather a remembrance to the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. It's about being optimistic. And this is the message of Pinchas. And that is to be a Kohen, to access our godly spark that we possess in our soul, to access the spark of the Kohen, to access the spark of the Mashiach, and by doing so, to fix this crack in the letter Vav, that the letter Vav should truly be complete, that we should find peace in our own life, and peace in the family in which we live, and peace in the world around us, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. As we are told that these 3 weeks, which are considered to be Bein HaMetzarim, the weeks that we mourn nationally, the destruction of the first and the second holy temples, says the Rambam that these days will be transformed to the greatest days of joy. That the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, that are normally national fast days, will become the greatest days of joy of the entire year, greater than Simchas Torah and even greater than Purim. And therefore, this is the way we are to look in the world, to see the Mashiach in everything, to see the potential in every reality, and to reveal that potential and to make that potential into a Shalom, into a complete reality, and bring about the true peace in the world. B'mheira b'imenu, amen.